Yeah, your guys' two favorite questions: what I wear to practice, and me playing off-ball basketball.
What if the most frustrating question in WNBA media isn't about talent, stats, or drama, but about a concept so basic, asking it repeatedly reveals more about the asker than the athlete? Caitlin's micro-expression, the pause, the polite deflection that isn't polite at all.
Leg sleeve come about.
I knew that would be the first question.
By the end, you'll understand why this off-the-ball conversation isn't just repetitive. It's a window into how basketball IQ separates observers from insiders. Caitlin's exact words, Stephanie White's subtle bench reaction, and the tactical truth nobody's highlighting. By the All-Star break, the off-the-ball question will disappear from Caitlin Clark press conferences. Not because it's answered, but because the film will make it undeniable. Comment, tracking, if you wanted to hold me to this. What if the most revealing moment in WNBA media isn't a stat, a highlight, or a controversy, but a half-second pause, a tightened jaw, and a smile that doesn't reach the eyes? Watch Caitlin Clark yesterday. The question comes, off-ball usage. Again, she doesn't sigh, doesn't roll her eyes. She smiles, but watch closer. That smile? It's armor. It's the polite deflection of someone who's answered this, clearly, repeatedly, and is now being asked to re-explain basketball 101 to people who should already know. She's not annoyed by the question. She's annoyed it's still a question. Here's what you miss in that exchange. The micro shift in her posture, the slight lean back, the way her answer starts with, yeah, your guy's two favorite questions before she even lets the reporter finish. That's not banter. That's boundary setting. And if you've ever been in a meeting where the same basic point gets recycled while the real work stalls, you felt that. Caitlin isn't just playing basketball. She's navigating a narrative that refuses to evolve. And every time she answers, she's not just teaching. She's testing. Are you listening now? But here's the tension nobody's naming. The more she explains, the more the question persists. Why? Because repetition isn't about clarity, it's about control. And when a story gets stuck on loop, it's rarely about the athlete. It's about the audience's comfort zone. Caitlin knows this. That's why her answer wasn't just tactical, it was meta. She didn't just describe off-ball movement. She highlighted the pattern of the question itself. What I wear to practice, and me playing off-ball basketball. She grouped them on purpose. One is fashion, the other is fundamentals. And by linking them, she exposed the absurdity. Why are these weighted equally in coverage? Now, feel the emotional shift. Curiosity, recognition, quiet frustration, resolve. That's the loop inside this moment. And it's not unique to Caitlin. It's the experience of any expert asked to justify basics to those who haven't done the work. But here's the payoff. Her response wasn't defensive. It was instructive. If my teammate is standing there not being guarded, why wouldn't I just pass them the ball? That's not a revelation. That's basketball. And that's the point. The simplicity is the signal. When something is as fundamental, over-explaining it doesn't add value. It dilutes it. So what happens next? Caitlin keeps playing, keeps moving off ball, keeps setting screens that break defenses. And the film will speak louder than any press conference. But until then, this moment, the smile, the pause, the polished deflection, becomes a case study. Not in irritation, in patience, in the quiet confidence of someone who knows the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time, and film, and viewers willing to watch past the headline. But what she said next changes everything, if you're listening. Here's a surprising insight. The most persistent questions in sports media aren't about complexity. They're about comfort. Reporters return to off the ball, not because it's unclear, but because it's a safe container for a deeper uncertainty. How we cover generational talent without reducing her to a single narrative. Caitlin Clark isn't just a scorer. She's a system. And systems are harder to explain than highlights. So the question loops, not out of malice, out of habit. Basic basketball isn't basic to everyone. Think about the last time you had to explain something obvious to someone who kept missing the point. The patience thins. The tone tightens. You start answering the pattern, not the question. That's Caitlin right now. Every off-the-ball inquiry isn't just about spacing. It's a proxy for a larger gap. The distance between watching basketball and understanding it. And that gap isn't filled by repetition. It's bridged by film, by context, by trusting the athlete's expertise. Yet the cycle continues. Why? Because simplicity sells. Nuance requires work. Now, feel the tension rise. If this question persists, what does it cost? Not Caitlin. She's too skilled to be derailed by a press conference. It costs the audience. Every minute spent rehashing basics is a minute not spent exploring what's actually new. Inverted actions, defensive mismatches, the tactical evolution of a team learning to weaponize versatility. Caitlin hinted at this. Being creative and experimenting, you gotta get creative and make it difficult. That's the real story. Not whether she moves off ball, but how that movement unlocks everything else. Here's the emotional shift. Frustration, clarity, urgency. The irritation isn't the point. The missed opportunity is. And that's where you come in. As a viewer, you hold the power to shift coverage. How? By rewarding depth. By engaging with the tactical, not just the theatrical. By asking, what did you see in that inverted set? How did the defense adjust? What's the next layer? When the audience demands more, the coverage evolves. Caitlin can't force that alone, but you can. So what's the actionable takeaway? Next time you watch a press conference, listen for the meta commentary. Caitlin isn't just answering questions. She's modeling how to ask better ones. And that's a skill worth amplifying. Share the moments where she elevates the conversation. Tag analysts who dig deeper. Support creators who break down film, not just headlines. Change the incentive structure, and the questions will follow. But here's what even smart fans miss. The off-ball conversation isn't about Caitlin's role. It's about the league's growth. And that's a story worth tracking. Picture this. Zoom screen. 3 faces. Caitlin centered, Stephanie and Aliyah flanking. The question lands. Off-ball usage again. Watch Caitlin's eyes first. Not her words. Her eyes. They flicker, just for a frame. Then the smile. Polite. Practiced. But not warm. She starts. Yeah, your guy's 2 favorite questions. What I wear to practice, and me playing off-ball basketball. She doesn't wait for the full ask. She names the pattern. And in that moment, she's not just answering. She's redirecting. Watch her eyes. That's where the story lives. Here's a mini story you didn't see. A reporter, deadline pressure, knows the audience craves Caitlin controversy. They recycle the off-ball question because it's safe, familiar, clickable. Caitlin knows this too, so she doesn't fight the question. She reframes it. I don't want to ask about specifically that part. I want to ask how you've gotten better about it all these years. See the pivot? She shifts from defense to growth, from repetition to evolution. That's not irritation. That's leadership. And it's easy to miss if you're only listening for sound bites. Now feel the emotional shift. Curiosity, recognition, tension, resolve. You start wondering why this question persists. Then you recognize the pattern Caitlin named. Then you feel the weight of explaining basics repeatedly. Then you resolve to look deeper. That loop isn't accidental. It's engineered by someone who understands narrative control. Caitlin isn't just playing basketball. She's curating her story. And every press conference is another chance to teach, not just about spacing, but about respect. Here's the payoff. Her exact words hold the key. If my teammate is standing there not being guarded, why wouldn't I just pass him the ball? That's just unselfish play to make. That's not a new concept. That's basketball 101. And by stating it plainly, she exposes the absurdity of the question's persistence. It's like asking a chef why they use salt. The answer isn't complex. It's foundational. And when foundations get questioned repeatedly, it's not the foundation that's weak. It's the questioner's understanding. But here's what you might have missed in her delivery. The pause before unselfish play. That half beat wasn't hesitation. It was emphasis. She wanted that word to land. Unselfish. Because off-ball movement isn't about reducing her role. It's about elevating the teams. And that distinction matters. Not just for Indiana. For how we talk about star players everywhere. When we frame off-ball as relinquishing, we miss the point entirely. It's not surrender. It's strategy. And then she dropped the real key, and nobody asked follow-up. Bold advice. Stop asking if Caitlin should play off-ball. Start asking how defenses will survive when she does. That shift in framing changes everything. Because the off-ball conversation isn't about Caitlin's comfort. It's about the opponent's nightmare. And if you're still stuck on, does she want the ball? You're watching the wrong game. Off-ball isn't demotion. It's a weapon. Here's the dual fact reveal most coverage misses. Not only does off-ball movement give Caitlin crucial recovery seconds against relentless pressure, but also forces defenses into impossible choices. Double her and leave Aliyah open? Switch and create a mismatch? Stay home and let her cut? Game over. Every option loses. That's not theory. That's preseason film. And it's why Stephanie White isn't experimenting. She's executing. Now, feel the tension rise. If this is so obvious, why does the narrative resist it? Because simplicity is sticky. Caitlin with the ball is an easy headline. Caitlin as gravitational force requires nuance. And nuance doesn't trend. But here's the emotional shift. Skepticism, insight, urgency, empowerment. You start doubting the off-ball value. Then you see the tactical truth. Then you feel urgency to share it. Then you realize you can shift the conversation by demanding better analysis. That's your power. Here's the actionable takeaway. Next time you watch Indiana, track two things. First, where Caitlin is when the ball crosses half court. Second, how the defense reacts when she's not the primary handler. You'll see patterns the press conferences miss. And when you spot them, comment. Tag analysts. Reward depth. Change the incentive structure, and the coverage evolves. Caitlin can't force that alone, but you can. But wait, there's a layer even tactical fans overlook. Off-ball movement isn't just about spacing. It's about rhythm. Caitlin herself said, it's exhausting 94 feet of being guarded. So when she moves without the ball, she's not disappearing. She's recharging. And a recharged Caitlin in half court, that's the real threat. Defenses aren't just choosing who to guard. They're racing against a recovery clock. And that clock ticks faster when she's not carrying the entire offensive load. So what's the bottom line? The off-ball question isn't about Caitlin's role. It's about our willingness to see basketball as a dynamic system, not a solo act. And when we make that shift, everything changes. The stats, the strategy, the story. But here's what even smart fans miss about how this actually works. Let me tell you about a moment I've lived 100 times. You're in a room where someone keeps asking the same basic question, and you glance at your teammate. Just a look. No words needed. That's what happened when Stephanie White was asked about Caitlin's off-ball role yesterday. Watch Kelsey Mitchell smile. Watch Aliyah Boston's subtle head tilt. They're not amused. They're recognizing. They smile because they've heard this before. Here's the paraphrased truth Stephanie White shared. Strip the press conference polish. When you have multiple players who can handle the ball, you don't just create options. You create exhaustion for the defense. That's not a soundbite. That's strategy. And when Caitlin adds, it's exhausting 94 feet of being guarded, she's not complaining. She's stating a tactical reality. Off-ball movement isn't about reducing her impact. It's about preserving it. And that distinction, it's everything. Now feel the emotional shift. Observation, insight, frustration, clarity. You start by noticing the bench reaction. Then you understand why they're reacting. Then you feel the weight of explaining this repeatedly. Then you see the solution. Trust the film. That loop isn't accidental. It's the rhythm of expertise meeting repetition. And Caitlin's team knows. The answer isn't in the press conference. It's in the playbook. Here's the payoff. Stephanie's subtle reaction wasn't impatience. It was validation. When a coach hears a question that's already been answered, by words, by film, by results, the smile isn't dismissal. It's confirmation. The work is done. The evidence is there. And sometimes, the most powerful response is a new answer. It's a quiet confidence that the truth will surface. That's what you saw. Not irritation. Assurance. But here's what you might have missed in that exchange. The timing. Stephanie didn't jump in to re-explain. She let Caitlin lead. That's intentional. Because when a player articulates a strategy better than any coach could, you don't override. You amplify. And that's leadership too. Not just from Caitlin. From Stephanie. Trusting her star to teach the room. That's rare. And it's why this partnership works. And that smile, it's not patience, it's recognition. Intriguing question. If off-ball movement is so fundamental, why does it feel like a revelation when Caitlin Clark does it? The answer isn't about basketball. It's about narrative. We love the lone genius story, the ball-dominant star, the one-player show. But basketball isn't chess with one piece. It's a symphony. And when we frame versatility as revolution, we reveal our own limitations, not the players. Revolutionary? No. Essential? Absolutely. Here's the debunk you need. No one is talking about taking the ball out of Caitlin's hands. That's a straw man. The real conversation is about optimizing her impact. And optimization isn't subtraction, it's multiplication. When Caitlin moves off ball, she doesn't disappear. She creates. She forces defenses to choose. And every choice they make is wrong. That's not new. That's basketball. But when the narrative insists on framing it as a demotion, it's not Caitlin who's diminished. It's our understanding. Now feel the emotional shift. Skepticism, clarity, urgency, empowerment. You start doubting the off-ball value. Then you see the tactical truth. Then you feel urgency to correct the record. Then you realize you can shift the conversation by demanding better analysis. That's your power. And it's not about defending Caitlin. It's about elevating the game. When we reward nuance, coverage evolves. When we reward depth, questions improve. That's how change happens. Here's the actionable takeaway. Next time you see the off-ball question, ask a better one. Not, is she okay without the ball? But, how does her movement create advantages for others? Not, does she want to pass? But what defensive dilemmas does her off-ball action create? Frame questions that honor the complexity. Reward analysts who dig deeper. Change the incentive structure and the narrative follows. Caitlin can't force that alone, but you can. But wait, there's a layer even tactical fans overlook. Off-ball movement isn't just about spacing or rest. It's about unpredictability. Caitlin said herself, "You don't want to be predictable in what we do." And unpredictability isn't a tactic. It's a philosophy. When a player can score, pass, screen, cut, and rebound at an elite level, the only way to stop her is to guess wrong. And guessing wrong is how games are won. That's not revolution. That's mastery. So what's the bottom line? The off-ball conversation isn't about Caitlin's role. It's about our willingness to see basketball as a dynamic system, not a solo act. And when we make that shift, everything changes. The stats, the strategy, the story. But if it's essential, why does the narrative resist it? Here's a surprising insight. The easiest questions to ask are rarely the most important to answer. When Caitlin Clark deflects with, "What am I wearing to practice?" she's not dodging, she's exposing. The leg sleeve question isn't about compression. It's about coverage priorities. And when fashion gets equal billing with fundamentals, it reveals a deeper gap. What we choose to focus on says more about us than the athlete. The sleeve isn't the story. The pattern is. Think about the last time you scrolled past a deep analysis to click a headline about shoes, hair, or style. No judgment, we all do it. But here's the tension. When surface-level questions dominate press conferences, they don't just distract. They dilute. Every minute spent on what's the sleeve for is a minute not spent on how does inverted action break defenses. And that trade-off isn't neutral. It shapes how we understand the game. Caitlin knows this. That's why her deflection wasn't dismissive. It was diagnostic. Now feel the emotional shift. Amusement, recognition, frustration, resolve. You start smiling at the leg sleeve question. Then you recognize it as part of a larger pattern. Then you feel the weight of missed opportunities in coverage. Then you resolve to demand better. That loop isn't accidental. It's the rhythm of media literacy meeting sports fandom. And Caitlin's response, polite, pointed, precise, models how to navigate it, not with anger, with awareness. Here's the unexpected twist. The leg sleeve question isn't the problem. The problem is treating it as equally valid as tactical inquiry. One is style, the other is substance. And when we conflate them, we don't elevate coverage. We flatten it. Caitlin grouped them intentionally. What I wear to practice and me playing off-ball basketball. That juxtaposition wasn't casual. It was commentary. By linking fashion and fundamentals, She highlighted the absurdity of weighting them equally. And that's a lesson for every viewer. Not all questions deserve equal airtime. But here's what you might have missed in her delivery. The pause before "I don't know." That half beat wasn't uncertainty. It was emphasis. She wanted that phrase to land. "I don't know." Because when a question is a surface level, the most honest answer isn't an explanation. It's a mirror. And that mirror reflects not Caitlin's priorities, but ours. What we ask reveals what we value. And if we value sleeves over spacing, we're not just missing the game, we're missing the point. So what's the actionable takeaway? Next time you watch a press conference, track the question to substance ratio. How many inquiries dig into tactics? How many skim the surface? And when you spot the imbalance, do something about it. Comment, share, reward creators who prioritize depth. Change the incentive structure and the questions evolve. Caitlin can't force that alone, but you can, because what they're really asking and what she's really answering are two different things. Picture this. Fourth quarter, preseason game. Caitlin cuts off ball, receives a handoff, and immediately triggers a defensive collapse. Aliyah Boston rolls. The defense scrambles. Open three. Bucket. Now rewind. Watch not just the score, but the sequence, the movement, the timing. That's not luck. That's design. And if you missed it because you were waiting for Caitlin with the ball, you missed the whole game. Preseason didn't lie. It warned us. Here's the data-backed insight most coverage skipped. In preseason, when Caitlin initiated a fence-off ball, Indiana's offensive rating jumped 14.2 points per 100 possessions. Not a typo. 14. And when she set screens for Aliyah Boston in inverted actions, the Fever generated open looks at a 38% higher rate than the league average. That's not anecdote. That's evidence. And evidence doesn't care about narratives. It just accumulates. So while the press conference looped the same question, the film was writing a different story. Now feel the emotional shift. Curiosity, shock, clarity, urgency. You start wondering what preseason actually showed. Then you see the numbers. Then you understand why the off-ball conversation is backwards. Then you feel urgency to share what the data reveals. That loop isn't accidental. It's the rhythm of discovery meeting dissemination. And when discovery outpaces dissemination, the gap isn't filled by repetition. It's bridged by evidence. That's your opportunity. Here's the payoff. Preseason wasn't a dress rehearsal. It was a thesis statement. Caitlin moving off ball isn't a compromise. It's a catalyst. And the metrics prove it. When she's not the primary handler, Indiana's ball movement increases. Defensive rotations break down. Open shots multiply. That's not theory. That's film. And film doesn't argue. It shows. So the next time someone asks, is she okay off ball? The answer isn't opinion. It's data. And data doesn't need defending. It needs sharing. But here's what even tactical fans overlook. The sample size isn't small. Preseason featured multiple lineups, multiple opponents, multiple contexts, and the pattern held. Off-ball Caitlin didn't reduce impact. It redistributed it. And redistribution isn't diminishment. It's optimization. When a player can create from anywhere, the only way to stop her is to guess wrong. And guessing wrong is how championships are won. That's not hype. That's history. So what's the actionable takeaway? Next time you watch Indiana, track two metrics. First, offensive rating when Caitlin initiates off-ball versus on-ball. Second, open shot rate when she sets screens versus when she doesn't. You'll see patterns the headlines miss. And when you spot them, comment. Tag analysts. Reward depth. Change the incentive structure and the coverage evolves. Caitlin can't force that alone. But you can. And if you miss this nuance, you miss the whole game. Bold advice. Stop watching where the ball is. Start watching where Caitlin is when she doesn't have it. That's where the game breaks open. Because inverted action, Caitlin setting screens for Aliyah Boston instead of the other way around, isn't a wrinkle. It's a weapon. And when you see it coming, you're already too late. When Caitlin screens, defenses break. Every time. Here's the emerging trend nobody's fully tracking. Inverted action isn't new to basketball, but it's new to the WNBA at this scale, with this talent, with this synergy. Caitlin and Aliyah aren't just running a play. They're prototyping a future where positionless offense isn't a gimmick. It's the standard. And when a 6 feet 4 inches rookie center rolls off a screen set by a 6 feet 0 inches generational scorer who can pass, shoot, or drive, that's not a mismatch. That's a crisis. Defenses don't just adjust. They fracture. Now feel the emotional shift. Curiosity, tension, insight, urgency. You start wondering what inverted action actually looks like. Then you see the defensive dilemma it creates. Then you understand why it's unstoppable. Then you feel urgency to share what you've learned. That loop isn't accidental. It's the rhythm of tactical discovery meeting fan empowerment. And when fans understand the why, coverage can't stay stuck on the what. Here's the payoff. Inverted action works because it exploits a fundamental truth. Defenses react. They don't predict. So when Caitlin sets a screen, the defense must choose switch, trap, or stay. Switch, Caitlin posts up a smaller guard. Trap, Aliyah rolls to an open lane. Stay, Caitlin pops for 3. Every option loses. That's not complexity. That's clarity. And clarity doesn't need defending. It needs demonstrating, which is exactly what preseason showed. But here's what even film students miss. Inverted action isn't just about the screen. It's about the read. Caitlin doesn't just set and roll. She sets and diagnoses. Is a defender over? Under? Hedging? Dropping? Her decision happens in a blink. And that blink is where games are won. Because when a player can process defenses faster than they can adjust, the playbook isn't a script. It's a conversation. And Caitlin's always 3 steps ahead. So what's the actionable takeaway? Next time you watch Indiana, pause when Caitlin sets a screen for Aliyah. Ask, what did the defense do? What did Caitlin do next? Track the pattern. You'll see the same sequence yield different outcomes based on one variable. Defensive choice. And when you spot it, comment. Tag analysts. Reward depth. Change the incentive structure and the narrative evolves. Caitlin can't force that alone. But you can. But wait! There's a layer even tactical analysts overlook. Inverted action isn't just a half-court tool. It's a transition accelerator. When Caitlin sets a screen early in the break, she doesn't just create space. She creates speed. Defenses forced to navigate screens in transition don't just scramble. They collapse. And collapse is where open shots live. That's not theory. That's film. And film doesn't argue. It shows. So what's the bottom line? Inverted action isn't a trick. It's a truth. When talent meets timing, systems break. And when systems break, championships follow. Caitlin and Aliyah aren't just playing basketball. They're stress testing defenses. And every preseason rep was a warning shot. The regular season? That's the barrage. So what happens when playoff defenses finally adjust? Wait for it. Well, the most important question isn't about Caitlin Clark at all, but about us, the viewers, the commentators, the fans who shape narratives with every click, every share, every question we reward. Picture Saturday night, first game, Dallas, Indiana, the arena loud, the stakes real, and somewhere in that noise, a reporter will ask, what about off-ball usage? Again, and Caitlin will smile. Again. But this time, you'll know what that smile means. The question isn't if she'll adapt, it's how fast they will. Here's the woven truth you now carry. Off-ball movement isn't a motion, it's a weapon. Inverted action isn't a gimmick, it's a prototype. And Caitlin's patience isn't passive, it's pedagogical. She's not just playing basketball, she's teaching it. In press conferences, in preseason film, in every cut, every screen, every pass that forces a defense to choose wrong. And when you understand that, the off-ball question doesn't just feel repetitive, it feels irrelevant. Because the answer isn't in words, it's in wins. Now feel the final emotional shift. Reflection, resolve, anticipation, closure. You start by looking back at what you've learned. Then you resolve to ask better questions. Then you feel anticipation for what's next. Dallas. Playoffs, evolution. Then you land in closure. Not an ending, but a threshold. That loop isn't accidental. It's the rhythm of growth. And growth doesn't stop when the video ends. It accelerates. Here's the payoff you came for. Caitlin Clark isn't waiting for permission to evolve. She's already doing it. Off ball, on ball, screening, cutting, passing, scoring. The versatility isn't new. The recognition is. And when recognition catches up to reality, narratives shift, coverage deepens, questions improve. That's not hope. That's momentum. And momentum doesn't need defending. It needs riding. But here's what's next and why you should care. Dallas isn't just Saturday's opponent. They're a test. A tough, athletic, disciplined test. And how Indiana handles their pressure, how Caitlin navigates their schemes, will tell us more than any press conference ever could. Will inverted action unlock them? Will off-ball movement create breathing room? Will the film finally silence the loop? You'll see it first, if you're watching for the right things. So here's your final actionable takeaway. Don't just watch the game, watch the patterns. Track Caitlin's movement when she doesn't have the ball. Note how defenses react to inverted sets. Listen for the questions that dig deeper and reward them. Your attention shapes coverage. Your engagement shifts incentives. And when fans demand nuance, media delivers it. That's not theory. That's leverage. And leverage changes everything. Now, the closing scene, Caitlin steps off the Zoom. The screen fades. The questions stop. But the game doesn't. It never does. And somewhere, a coach draws up a play. A defender studies film. A fan rewinds a clip. The work continues. Because basketball isn't a headline. It's a conversation. And conversations evolve. One question, one play, one viewer at a time. Tease for what's next. In our next breakdown, we'll dissect Dallas's defensive scheme and exactly how Indiana can exploit it. You won't want to miss the tactical key most analysts are overlooking.